Welcome to Tales of the Force, a place where ancient power stirs, destinies collide, and unseen currents shape every choice across the galaxy. If you're drawn to lost orders, fragile balance, and legends whispered from star to star, you're exactly where you belong. Tap like and subscribe to keep these stories alive, and leave a comment below. Tell us where you feel the Force calling from. Sit back, relax, and prepare for tonight's tale. The Hunter and the Blade. Metal screams as the tower comes apart. Kareth Dyn is already running when the first gravity tether snaps. The scrapyard mesa lurches beneath his boots, a rolling shudder that turns solid ground into a moving trap. Above him, stacked hulls shear loose, freighters, gunships, things stripped of names, sliding as one mass toward the edge. He vaults a torn bulkhead as an engine core detonates behind him. The blast throws him forward. He hits, rolls, keeps moving. Shrapnel winds past his head, slicing sparks from the durasteel around him. The air smells like ionized metal and burning coolant. A gunship drops through the smoke. It doesn't hover. It descends, controlled, deliberate. Repulsors throttled just enough to stay stable as debris rains down around it. Its belly opens. Commander Vesk Talon drops first. Grav spikes punch into the mesa with a hard crack, anchoring him in place. Magnetic boots lock a half-second later. He lands facing. Kareth, not blocking the path, cutting it off. He doesn't ignite a weapon. He raises one hand and fires a tether line. The cable snaps out, punches into a falling hull plate, and Talon twists his wrist. The plate swings like a pendulum, smashing down in front of Kareth and forcing him vertical. Kareth swears and jumps. He hits the side of a scrap tower at a dead run, fingers finding seams, boots scraping for purchase. The structure shifts under his weight. Below, Talon fires again, another tether latching onto a crane arm, redirecting its fall. The arm collapses toward Kareth. He pushes off, letting the Force catch him mid-air. The jump carries him across a gap filled with falling wreckage, momentum barely controlled. His shoulder clips a rotating fin. Pain flares white-hot. Shrapnel rips through the air. Kareth ignites his lightsaber. The blade hums to life just in time. He twists, batting aside jagged fragments that would have opened his chest. One piece glances off the blade and spins away, molten at the edges. No blaster fire, just falling metal. Talon moves again, advancing without hurry, boots locking and unlocking as he crosses unstable ground like it's a parade deck. He fires a pulse grenade. It detonates mid-air. The Force drops out. The world goes heavy. Kareth stumbles as the connection he relies on goes dead, like a limb going numb. He lands hard on a slanted hull and slides, boots scraping hopelessly. A second tether snaps out. Kareth rolls as the cable punches into the metal beside his head. He slashes it free on instinct, sparks spraying, then scrambles to his feet as the Force comes back in a weak, flickering surge. He runs. The scrapyard opens ahead, rows of stacked wrecks giving way to a conveyor zone. Belts stretching deep into the planet's guts. Electromagnetic interference hums through the air, thick enough to make his teeth buzz. Sensors die here. He knows it. So does Talon. Kareth leaps the gap and lands on the first belt as it shudders, to life beneath him. The surface jerks forward, dragging him toward the depths. He sprints with it, boots hammering, saber held low to cut obstacles as they come. Behind him, Talon steps onto the belt without breaking stride. Sirens howl, reclamation protocols activate, the conveyors accelerate. Crushers slam into motion ahead, massive jaws grinding open and shut with bone-shaking force. Magnetic lifts swing overhead, dragging whole sections of wreckage into alignment. The scrapyard wakes up. Kareth ducks under a swinging hull plate. Force pushes off a rising magnetized slab and vaults onto a parallel belt. The move costs him. The environment reacts, debris shifts, cascades, reveals him. Sonic disruptors shriek. The sound punches into his skull mid-leap. His focus shatters. He clips the edge of the belt and crashes shoulder first, rolling to avoid being dragged under a descending crusher. Talon closes the distance. His electrostaff snaps to full length with a sharp crack. Their cortosis weave gleams dull black as he brings it around in a sweeping strike. Kareth barely blocks. The impact sends a feedback shock up his arm, numbing his hand. He recoils, forced back as the belt carries them both toward the grinders. Sparks spray as the staff scrapes the saber blade, each contact biting back at him. Kareth kicks off the belt, slamming into a rising magnet lift. He rides it up, then jumps again, grabbing a dangling cable and swinging clear as the crusher slams shut beneath him. He lands hard, breath ragged, muscles burning. Talon lets him go. He doesn't pursue immediately. He plants the staff, anchoring himself as debris slams around him, watching Kareth scramble deeper into the maze. "Run," Talon says, voice carrying even over the machinery. "You always do." The belts surge faster. Kareth doesn't look back. He dives between two moving slabs as a magnetic crane tears a gunship carcass out of its moorings. The air fills with sparks and screaming metal. He disappears into the interference. Behind him, Talon taps a control on his gauntlet. The scrapyard accelerates again. The belts run faster. Kareth bursts out of the interference haze onto a wider span, boots hammering against vibrating metal as the conveyor pitches him forward. The scrapyard's heart pounds now, hydraulics slamming, magnets thundering overhead, compactors cycling in murderous rhythm. Every step moves the world. He knows it, feels it. The force tugs at loose wreckage with every breath he takes. He throttles it back, relying on muscle and timing instead, pure motion. A crane arm drops in front of him without warning. Kareth slides, sparks streaming from his boots, and rolls under the arm as it slams down hard enough to buckle the belt. The impact throws him bullways into a wall of stacked plating. He rebounds, slashes a grip into the metal and climbs. The staff strikes above him. Talon vaults across the belts, electrostaff extending midair. He lands higher, boots, locking instantly, then swings downward. Kareth blocks late. The feedback shock hits harder this time, rattling his teeth and numbing his shoulder. The belt yanks them both toward a crusher. Kareth disengages and leaps sideways onto a rotating magnetic lift. The lift spins under his weight, pulling wreckage up around him like orbiting moons. He runs the curve, cutting loose debris to clear a path. Talon follows, doesn't jump. He fires 2 tether lines into the lift's rim and lets the magnets pull him in. The cables wind tight, hauling him across in a controlled arc. He lands facing Kareth, staff already moving. They clash again. The saber slides along cortosis, hissing. Sparks spit. The staff snaps short, then long, its length shifting to jam Kareth's footing. A quick jab catches Kareth in the ribs, drives the air from his lungs, and sends him skidding across the spinning surface. A sonic disruptor shrieks. Kareth's leap goes wrong. He clips the edge of a rising slab and crashes into a heap of stripped droid parts. He rolls, comes up on one knee, saber raised just in time to deflect a blow that would have taken his head. The force surges despite him. Loose wreckage lifts, spins, slams together. Talon uses it. He pivots, letting the moving metal shield him, herding Kareth toward a narrowing channel where 2 belts converge. Crushers loom ahead, their jaws opening wider as the speed increases. Kareth slashes a support strut and drops through the gap between belts, hitting hard and rolling as the jaws slam shut above him. He comes up on a narrower strip, balance shot, lungs burning. Time pressure builds in the air like static. Warning klaxons escalate. The belts surge again. Talon steps down after him, boots magnetizing mid-fall, he advances with measured steps, staff humming, forcing Kareth back inch by inch toward a magnetized lift well. "Your patterns are inefficient," Talon says, voice calm. "You jump when cornered. You climb when pressured. You retreat instead of committing." Kareth lunges. It's a feint, force push timed with a belt jolt. Talon staggers half a step. Kareth slides past him, sabre carving a shallow line across the staff. The feedback shock snaps through him, but he's already moving. He dives into the lift well as the magnet surges. Wreckage tears from above, screaming as it's dragged into orbit. Kareth grabs a dangling cable and swings hard, letting the magnetic pull whip him across the void and slam him onto a parallel belt. He lands running. The scrapyard roars around him, systems stacking on systems. The air crackles with electrical arcs. Molten slag spills from ruptured conduits, splashing across belts and hissing as it cools. Kareth weaves through it all, cutting, ducking, siding, never stopping. Behind him, Talon slows. He plants his staff and watches. Kareth realizes it a heartbeat too late. The belts ahead split into 3 paths. He takes the center without thinking, and the ground drops away, a trap. The belt angles sharply downward, feeding into a crusher throat the size of a hangar bay. Emergency rails snap up too late to stop the pull. Kareth digs in, boot screaming, sabre stabbing into the belt to anchor himself. The force flares as he fights the pull, metal warping around the blade. The connection flickers, a focused dampener burst hits him square in the chest. The force cuts out again. Kareth slams forward, skidding toward the grinder. He claws for purchase, fingers scraping uselessly across moving metal. A cable snaps taut around his wrist. Talon hauls him back with brutal force, yanking him clear of the jaws and slamming him into the belt wall. Kareth hits hard, stars bursting across his vision. Talon looms close now, stuff humming inches from Kareth's throat. "I don't kill you by overpowering you," Talon says. "I let the yard do that." He releases the cable. Kareth stumbles free, barely keeping his feet as the belts surge again. He looks, just in time to see Talon step back, deliberately opening an escape route as a crane arm collapses between them. The path is narrow, dangerous, obvious, and Kareth takes it. He runs as the world collapses around him, cranes tearing loose, belts snapping, towers beginning to lean. The scrapyard is entering full compaction. Minutes left. Talon doesn't follow immediately. He waits, listening to the system scream, watching the patterns change. Then he moves, boarding a higher track with a single smooth leap, pursuit tightening like a noose. The yard begins to fail. The scrapyard breaks its own spine. A conveyor snaps ahead of Kareth with a sound like a cannon shot. The belt whips free, flailing wreckage into the air as magnetic fields surge out of control. Towers begin to fall, not toppling, but pulling sideways as competing magnets tear at their mass. Escape routes vanish in seconds. Kareth skids to a stop at the edge of a widening gap. Below him, a gravity well of loose metal spins into violent orbit. Panels, engines, droid frames colliding and shattering in a screaming halo. He turns and runs the other way. A shadow drops in front of him. Talon lands hard, boots locking, staff already extended. He strikes first, low sweep, high jab, shortening the staff mid-swing to jam Kareth's guard. The sabre meets cortosis again, the shock tearing through Kareth's arm and forcing him back. A crane arm slams down between them. Kareth vaults it, landing on a slanted hull that's sliding fast toward the orbital storm. He scrambles, sabre biting into metal for purchase, then leaps and lands on the deck of a salvage crawler. The platform groans under his weight. Massive, mobile, slow, hope flares. The crawler lurches forward as its engines spool, dragging itself along shattered rails. Its bulk shoves debris aside, creating space, distance, time. Kareth sprints across the deck, heading for the command spine as warning lights strobe red. Behind him, Talon fires. Grappling pylons. The pylons punch into the crawler's flank and retract, hauling him aboard as the platform accelerates. He lands in a crouch, already moving, boots clanging against the deck as the crawler plows into the chaos. They crash inside. Grinding machinery fills the interior, rollers, presses, rotating blades chewing scrap into feedstock. The air is hot, thick with sparks and vaporized metal. Walkways shake as the crawler strains against the overload. Kareth ducks under a swinging piston and slashes a control arm, sending it sparking into a wall. He kicks off the railing and clears a gap as molten slag pours down behind him. Talon follows through the fire. He fires a dampener burst point blank. The force dies again. Kareth stumbles, barely catching himself on a railing as a rotating grinder lunges for his legs. He yanks free an improvised weapon, a length of Durasteel pipe, and jams it into the grinder's teeth. The machine screams and stalls, buying him seconds. Talon closes. The staff cracks into Kareth's side, folding him around the blow. He rolls, comes up swinging with the pipe, smashing it into Talon's shoulder hard enough to stagger him back a step. Just one. The crawler shudders violently. Containment warnings scream through the deck. A reactor gauge spikes into the red. Kareth scrambles up a ladder as a floor plate tears loose beneath him. He hauls himself onto the command spine. Open air, wind shear ripping at him as debris rains down from the collapsing scrapyard above. The crawler accelerates blindly, tearing itself apart. Talon emerges behind him, staff humming, coat snapping in the wind. He advances without hesitation, each step measured as the platform bucks underfoot. "You've exhausted your tricks," Talon shouts over the roar. "You're slower, sloppier." Kareth backs toward the narrowing end of the spine. There's nowhere left to run. The scrapyard's gravity storm howls around them, dragging wreckage into lethals. "Arcs! The crawler's core alarms shift tone. Critical. Talon attacks." The staff lashes out, battering Kareth's guard aside. A second strike clips his knee, dropping him to one leg. Talon presses in, relentless, forcing Kareth back with controlled, punishing blows. Kareth blocks, parries, absorbs shocks that numb his arms and blur his vision. He's losing ground, seconds from being pinned again. He stops retreating. The force surges, not outward, but down. Kareth slams his hand into the deck and wrenches. Structural bolts tear free beneath Talon's feet. The command spine twists violently as a crane arm, dragged by the storm, smashes into the crawler's flank. Talon stumbles as the ground shifts unexpectedly under him, just once. Kareth moves. He lunges, not to strike but to disarm. The sabre hooks the staff and wrenches it sideways. Talon resists and overcommits, trying to wrench it back as the deck lurches again. Kareth rams his shoulder into Talon's chest. They crash, together as another explosion rocks the crawler. Talon's grip breaks. The staff skids away, clanging into the void. Kareth doesn't stop. He grabs Talon by the harness and hurls him into a collapsing crane arm. Metal folds around Talon, crushing, pinning him as the arm tears free and slams into the deck. Kareth stumbles back, breath ragged. The crawler's detonation timer locks in. Seconds. He slashes a final control panel, forcing the platform into an uncontrolled dive, then turns and runs as the command spine buckles beneath him. He leaps, riding a collapsing wave of debris down into the scrapyard's depths as the crawler erupts above. The explosion rips the sky apart. Fire, metal, and shockwave tear through the reclamation zone, burying everything beneath it. Kareth vanishes into the moving wreckage, swallowed by smoke and falling steel. Far above, something shifts. A broken arm twitches. Talon breathes. Buried. Crushed. Furious. The hunt is not over. The scrapyard eats its own feed. Kareth slams into the wreckage wave hard enough to drive the breath from his lungs. He tumbles end over end through falling metal, bouncing off hull fragments and torn girders as the explosion above him turns night into a rolling inferno. He hits a slanted freighter plate and slides. Below him, the scrapyard is collapsing inward, cranes folding, belts snapping, magnetic storms pulling wreckage into spiralling death funnels. The ground isn't ground anymore. It's a moving surface with a mind of its own. Kareth digs in, boot screaming, sabre punching into the plate to slow his descent. The blade bites deep. The force flares just enough to keep him from being thrown free. He drops again. This time he lands in a narrow ravine between compactors as they slam shut behind him, missing his legs by a metre. Hydraulic pistons hammer the walls, showering sparks and slag across his shoulders. He runs. Every breath burns. His arms shake from feedback shock. His knee screams with each step. The force is there, but thin, strained by interference and exhaustion. Behind him, the scrapyard groans. Something moves that shouldn't. Metal shifts against metal with deliberate force. A slab lifts. A crane arm buckles outward. A silhouette pulls itself free of the wreckage pile where the crawler detonated. Commander Vesk Talon emerges. His armour is torn. One grav spike drags uselessly behind him. Blood streaks his jaw, but his eyes are locked forward, burning with focus that's tipped past control. He doesn't retrieve the staff. He advances bare-handed, using the yard itself. A magnetic surge snaps toward Kareth's back. He spins, barely deflecting a flying engine block that would have crushed him flat. He vaults a compactor pit as it opens beneath him, heat blasting up from molten slag. Talon follows, slower now, limping, but the environment bends around him. Cranes reorient. Belts reverse. The scrapyard closes lanes, forcing Kareth into tighter corridors. Pinned again. Kareth bursts into an open reclamation lane just as safety systems fail completely. Warning lights go dark. The machines stop pretending they're controlled. Everything moves at once. A tower falls sideways across the lane, smashing down meters behind Kareth. He leaps, clips the edge, rolls hard and comes up near the end of the corridor. No exits. Talon steps into view through smoke and drifting embers. "You chose the ground," Talon says, voice rough now. "Now you die on it." He raises his gauntlet. Kareth moves first. He doesn't attack Talon, he attacks the yard. The force slams outward. Not precise, not gentle. Structural bolts rip free, crane arms buckle. A magnetic lift tears loose and swings wild, smashing into the lane between them. The ground heaves violently, Talon stumbles, boots losing lock as the surface twists unpredictably. He fires a dampener burst on instinct, and it misses as the lane collapses sideways. Kareth charges through falling, debris, sabre carving a path through wreckage, using momentum instead of finesse. He slams into Talon's shoulder first, driving him back toward a collapsing edge. They grapple. No weapons, just weight and timing and failing ground. Talon tries to pin him to reassert control, but the scrapyard doesn't obey anymore. A magnetic surge yanks Talon sideways. Kareth uses it, twisting, throwing Talon down hard against the buckling deck. Metal gives way beneath them. Kareth rips free, staggering back as the lane tears itself apart. He slashes one last support and dives as the entire section collapses into the depths. Talon disappears beneath the falling wreckage. The ground settles, briefly. Kareth stands alone amid drifting metal and dying machines, chest heaving, sabre humming low. The scrapyard continues to grind itself down, but the pursuit has broken. For now. He turns and vanishes into the smoke as the last systems scream themselves silent. The hunt survives, but control does not. The scrapyard doesn't stop, it slows, grinding itself down in violent increments, metal settling, magnets sapping loose, fires burning where there's still oxygen to feed them. The sky above Oryx Scrapworld is a ceiling of smoke and drifting wreckage, lit by distant detonations as systems fail in sequence. Kareth Dyn runs anyway. He moves through a canyon of collapsed hulls, boots slipping on oil and slag. Every step sends pain lancing up his leg. His sabre hangs low now, blade flickering as power fluctuations ripple through the interference. A magnetic surge tears a freighter rib loose behind him. He ducks as it sails overhead and smashes into a pile of compacted debris, throwing up a wave of shrapnel. He vaults it, stumbles, recovers, never stopping. The ground lifts. Kareth spins just as wreckage erupts behind him, forced upward by brute strength and sheer refusal to stay buried. Talon claws free from the debris pile, armour crushed, one arm hanging useless, but still moving. Forward. Still all hunting. His gauntlet sparks as he forces it to life. A short-range dampener pulse ripples out, slamming into Kareth mid-stride. The force gutters out completely this time. Kareth hits hard. He rolls through the impact, comes up on one knee, sabre raised just as Talon lunges bare-handed, slamming him back into a wrecked shuttle hull. Metal dents inward around Kareth's shoulders. Talon drives in close. This isn't control anymore. It's obsession. He throws Kareth once into a collapsing crane support, throws him again into a conveyor housing that splits apart under the impact. Each hit is heavy, inefficient, fueled by anger rather than precision. Kareth absorbs it, waits. The ground shudders violently as a final reclamation protocol triggers, one last failsafe attempting to compact the entire zone. Everything starts moving inward. Kareth shoves off the hull, slipping under Talon's next grab. He doesn't retreat. He steps into the chaos. He slashes, not at Talon, at the ground. Structural bolts tear free as Kareth rips them loose one after another, timing the pulls with the scrapyard's own convulsions. Crane arms collapse sideways. A magnet lift spins out of control, dragging wreckage with it in a widening arc. Talon hesitates, just once. Kareth takes it. He surges forward, driving a shoulder into Talon's chest, carrying them both across buckling ground toward a forming sinkhole of grinding metal and fire. Talon fights to regain footing, but there is no footing left. Kareth rams him down hard. The sabre comes around in a brutal arc, not a killing blow, but a disarming one. The blade carves through Talon's gauntlet assembly, sending it spinning away in molten pieces. Talon screams, not in pain but in rage. Kareth doesn't finish it. He twists, slams a control spike into a half-buried detonator node and shoves Talon backward as the crawler's delayed charges finally cascade through the yard. The ground drops. Kareth turns and runs as the entire section collapses into a roaring sink of fire, metal, and magnetic fury. He dives and rides the collapsing debris wave down into the scrapyard's depths, vanishing into the moving wreckage as explosions stitch the sky above. When the fire clears, nothing remains but broken metal and settling ash. Far below, something moves. Talon crawls from the edge of the collapse, broken, buried to the waist. Fury burning hotter than any reactor. He slams a fist into the wreckage, sending sparks flying. Kareth Dyn is gone. The hunt continues. But now, it's personal. "Debris!" Vera shouted. "Cover the belly!" Jarek dropped them another meter's worth, letting the worst of the shrapnel rake their upper hull instead of the engines. Impacts hammered the ship. Warning klaxons layered over each other. In the turret, Keln's jam gave way under his boot. The cannon cycled live just as the jagged panel of tie wing tried to scythe through his viewport. He flinched aside, then swung the gun down in sheer anger, stitching fire across a low-flying pursuer until it vanished in an expanding ball that lit the canyon walls. "Tally 2 down," he growled, breath tight. "Guns up. Don't ever fly like that again." "Side channel, 3 o'clock, Vera cut in. "Narrow, low ceiling, shadows are thick. It'll break their dive angles." Jarek saw it. A sliver on the scanners, a darker streak in the canyon wall. It was a stupid cut, barely wide enough for their hull. Perfect. He rolled the courier on her side and knifed through the opening. Stone whisked past close enough to touch. The running lights painted it in jittery streaks. The roar of TIE engines dimmed above them. The vertical dives suddenly cut off by overhanging rock. Alone for the first time in minutes, the ship's own wounded rumble filled the space. 30 seconds of calm if they don't have the meats. "Same maps," Keln said. "Make them count," Jarek answered. He eased off the throttle by a hair. The engine's scream dropped half a note. It felt like betrayal. "Don't get comfortable," Vera said. Her console spat a fresh line of symbols. "Reading mass ahead, above us." "What kind of mass?" "The kind that's changing vector." The side channel bent back toward the main canyon. As they approached the junction, a shadow dropped into view ahead. Sleek, armoured, running cold. An Imperial light boarding craft, riding an upper pass, falling neatly into their path like it had been waiting for this exact cut. Its forward grapples unfolded as it rotated belly to belly with their approach. "They're not just chasing," Vera said. "They're intercepting." Jarek's teeth clenched. The canyon outside tightened, rock closing in until only one ship could pass, and the one in front had claws. The Black Canyon's walls shimmered with invisible thorns. Magnetic. Or veined the stone, spitting interference that crawled across every panel. Jarek fought the yoke as the courier bucked. The HUD flickered with false contacts, target reticles wandering drunkenly. Shield stuttered, dropping and reappearing in broken arcs. "Reinforcements inbound at the exit," Keln called, eyes on the tactical repeater by his knee. Multiple signatures holding high over open terrain. "They're waiting for us to pop out like a cork." "We don't give them a clean shot," Jarek replied. "We're not stopping." A coolant line blew somewhere aft. Steam burst through a vent grill, fogging the cockpit in a hot white blast. Jarek coughed, blinking against the sting as Vera slapped a panel, rerouting flow. "Engines are bleeding," she said. "You keep this up, they'll melt out of the hull." "Better fire than capture," Jarek answered. His knuckles stayed tight on the controls. He refused to ease off when the ground trembled from another overhead. Barrage. Ahead, the Imperial boarding craft matched his moves like a mirror, using its superior thrusters to stay centered in the canyon. Its ventral clamps flexed open, waiting for the moment their bellies aligned. "Jarek," Keln said quietly, "if it gets a lock, you have to level and cut speed before it rips us in half." "Not happening," Jarek shot back. The boarding craft surged closer, then snapped down. Metal screamed as its claws punched onto the courier's dorsal spine, sending a quake through the whole frame. Red indicators flared across Vera's board. "They're clamped. Hull stress at 2 high. If you keep jinking, they'll tear us open without cutting." "If I stop the TIEs from behind, turn us into scrap," Jarek growled. "Pick your catastrophe." The extra mass dragged them sideways. The ship yawed toward the canyon wall. Jarek fought it, forcing them back to center, every correction feeding lethal stress into the joined hulls. Above, the boarding. Craft's lower hatch irised open. A cutting circle began to glow on the courier's dorsal corridor ceiling. "Party on deck 4, Keln said, already dropping out of the turret. "I'll bring confetti." He sprinted through a corridor that flexed under his boots. Ahead, the deck shook as the cutting torch bit through. Fine dust floated up, sucked slowly toward the growing ring of orange heat in the ceiling. "Everyone off that axis!" he shouted, shoving a tech past the intersection. "Seal the side hatches!" The circle blew inward. Atmosphere howled out, dragging loose crates and a screaming crewman toward the new sky. Keln lunged, catching the man's belt with one hand and a handhold with the other. "Hit the emergency bulkhead!" he roared. A second crewman slammed a palm onto the control. Heavy plates began to grind down from the ceiling on either side of the breach. Slow, too slow. White armoured troopers dropped through the glowing hole, boots slamming to deck, weapons barking into the gale. Bolts seared past Keln's ear, carving scars into the wall. Keln's floor tugged at him like a chain. He could let go, push himself away, take cover. He gritted his teeth and held on. "Move!" he roared at the man in his grip, hauling him sideways against the pull of vacuum. A bolt took the handhold near Keln's knuckles. He almost lost everything to the sudden jolt. He twisted, firing from the hip with his blaster. One trooper toppled back into the void, flailing, then vanished past the hull. The second bulkhead plate slammed down, narrowing the airflow. The wind lessened, but not enough. Sensors screamed overhead, hull integrity dropping, pressure differential rising. On the bridge, Vera held herself against a console as the ship lurched again. "They're cutting more access points," she said. "I can feel it all through the frame." "Feel less. Fix more," Jarek replied, though sweat trickled down his temple. The clamp was fighting his every move, trying to stabilize against his piloting. Engines howled, drowning out even the TIEs. The canyon folded around them in tighter curves. Stone reached for their wingtips on every turn. "Forward section reports boarders at junction B12, Vera snapped. "They're using the stress to open microfractures. This canyon is doing half their work." "Then we make it do half ours, Royam," Jarek said. He yanked them into another brutal roll, grinding clamps against their own locating pins. An impact boomed overhead, a heavy dark presence dropping into the torn corridor. The boarders shifted, making room with nervous backward glances. A new figure landed amid them, in a controlled crouch. Black flight suit reinforced with armour plates, helmet marked with an angular crimson sigil. A compact hilt hung at his hip. "Scythe leader is aboard," one of the troopers' comms crackled. The Imperial ace rose slowly, steady against the lurching deck as if the canyon's turbulence were nothing. "Hold your fire," he said through his vocode, a voice calm as steel. "We're not here to kill them." He thumbed his hilt. Red light flashed as a blade sprang to life, humming in the thin air rushing past. "We're here to give my squadron time." Vera hit the junction at a sprint, boots slipping under her as the deck heaved. Blaster fire strobed the corridor ahead. Troopers traded shots with pinned rebels behind an overturned crate. The open circle in the ceiling still bled air, though the emergency plates now bit into the edges, turning the flow into a roaring funnel. The black-armoured ace stood in the middle of it, crimson blade carving away incoming bolts, each deflection controlled enough to send energy into bulkheads instead of his own men. He didn't look rushed. He looked like he was waiting out a clock. "Fall back," Vera shouted to the rebels, raising her voice over the wind. "You're not stopping him here." Keln glanced back once, still, at the ragged edge of the decompression zone, braced against a strut that was slowly bending under the pull. "Not leaving anyone behind," he snapped. "Then move them faster," she replied. He hauled the last crewman through the weakening gale, shoving him toward the rear. A bolt grazed Keln's shoulder. He staggered, but stayed upright, teeth bared, refusing to give ground even as blood darkened his sleeve. Vera stepped into the killing lane, her hand lifted, fingers curling. The rushing air twisted. Troopers nearest the breach lost footing as the pull suddenly shifted sideways. They slammed into the wall instead of the open sky. The ace's helmet turned toward her. For a heartbeat, There was a silent appraisal behind that black visor. Then he moved. He surged forward with a speed that matched the canyon's violence, blade drawing a burning line at waist height. Veera dropped back. The cut passed centimetres from her chest, scorching her vest. She threw herself sideways, grabbing an overhead pipe as the wind tried to rip her into the breach. "You're misusing your gifts," the ace said, blade weaving between blaster bolts, always patching holes instead of shaping outcomes. She ignored the words, focusing on the rhythm of the ship under her feet, the way Jarek's reckless flying fed energy into every joint. Another hard bank. The corridor tilted. Everyone slid toward the lower wall. Keln's floor bit again. He could have taken that moment to duck behind the next bulkhead, seal himself in with the survivors. Instead he pivoted, firing a last burst that dropped a trooper lining up on Veera. "Go!" he yelled. "I'll get the seal!" He leapt toward the manual override for the dorsal emergency lock, a wheel by the very edge of the breach. "That's outside the safe line," Veera shouted. "Never liked the safe line," Keln grunted, fingers closing around the wheel as his boots left the deck. He hung there, body horizontal over the roaring gap, the canyon sky a smear of dark blue above. With a bellow he cranked the wheel. The emergency shutters groaned down thicker, biting through twisted plating. The wind dropped to a savage gale instead of a killing one. One of the troopers tried to shoot him loose. Veera snapped her hand. The bolt ricocheted into the ceiling. The ace watched, blade held low, almost relaxed. "You run too hot," he told her over the scream of atmosphere, tone almost conversational. "You think the Force will turn every recklessness into a miracle." He stepped forward again. Their blades met. Hers called from the hilt at her belt, blue fire crossing red in a shower of sparks. Every clash shook the already wounded corridor. "Jarek," she hissed into her comm, "you're shaking us apart." "You want me to slow down?" he shot back. "No," she said, teeth bared as she pushed against the ace's blade. "I want you to make it worth something." They fought in a space barely wide enough to move, every swing constrained by bulkheads and struts. A single overreach meant cleaving into the hull. The ace used that. He matched her, never overextending, always turning her more aggressive arcs into glancing blows that carved harmless furrows instead of crippling cuts. He was stalling. Every second he held them here was another second his squadron closed on the canyon exit, tightening the noose outside. Veera felt the temptation rise. Push harder, draw deeper, let raw power blow him back and damn the consequences. She saw in the corner of her eye a hairline fracture tracing down the corridor wall with each impact. If she gave into brute force, the canyon would finish what the Imperials started. She shifted. Instead of meeting the next strike head-on, she let it slide past, sidestepping in the narrow space. Her blade flicked once, cutting the overhead pipe she'd used as a handhold moments ago. The pipe dropped, slamming between them, jamming against bulkheads. The ace's blade buried in it for a heartbeat. Veera reached not for his weapon, but for the clamp above. Through the force she felt the boarding craft's grip on their hull, teeth-biting metal, actuators straining against Jarek's insane manoeuvres. She pulled. Outside, the clamp groaned. Under constant stress from the mad dance through the canyon, Veera's sudden wrench tore one of its primary pins free. The boarding craft lurched, momentarily misaligned with the courier. Jarek felt the change like a sudden slack in a line. "Now?" he asked. "Now," she rasped. He rolled hard. The courier snapped into a brutal corkscrew. G-forces clawed at every body aboard. The boarding craft, off balance, couldn't match the motion. Its remaining clamp scraped free, ripping scores down the hull before failing altogether. The Imperial ace staggered as the deck shifted under him. He had a choice, stay and be flung out through the breach as the gorge walls spun past, or leave. He chose survival. He sprang for the hole, blade cutting a widening path. A moment later he was gone, hurtling back toward his own craft as the boarding ship tumbled away into the canyon, slamming into a rock spire in a blast that shook stone for kilometres. Vera hit the floor hard, vision dimming. "Boarders repelled," she croaked into her comm, "but we paid for it." They had. One of the courier's ventral stabilizers had sheared almost clean off when the boarding clamps tore free. The aft life support grid flashed red across Vera's console. Compartments in the back half of the ship flickered to vacuum one by one as emergency locks failed. "The ship won't climb anymore," she said, forcing herself back to her feet. "Attitude control is limited. You've got forward or you've got rock." "Forward it is," Jarek answered, voice hoarse. The canyon narrowed again, the walls rising and bending until they formed a twisting stone throat. Vertical clearance dropped to almost nothing. The sky above became a jagged ribbon only visible when the path twisted just so. TIES moved into stack formation behind them, line astern and above, leapfrogging their attack runs. One would dive, firing in short, disciplined bursts, then peel away as the next slipped into its place. Blasts walked up the canyon floor, licking at the courier's engines. "Can't get a lock through this interference," Keln growled in the turret. "They're using the ore like a cloak." "Fire where they have to be," Jarek said. "Not where they are." Keln bared his teeth. He knew these patterns. He'd seen enough disciplined squadrons to predict their cadence. He waited through one dive, tracking the empty air where the next tie should appear. The turret kicked under him. A tight, controlled burst met the next fighter as it dropped into the attack lane. The tie flared into fragments, its explosion smacking the canyon walls and rolling back as a pressure wave that shoved the courier sideways. "Got one," Keln said, "but they've still got numbers." "Keep them honest," Jarek replied. The ship juddered. A fresh alarm joined the choir, primary engine temperature spiking. "You push the core through its casing," Vera snapped. "That's not a warning, that's a death sentence." "Then we outrun it," Jarek said. "That's what got us here, Sam." She shot back. The canyon bent again. For the first time in what felt like hours, a wedge of daylight appeared ahead, a bright slash at the end of the twisting throat. "Exit visual," Keln said, disbelief edging into his voice. For a moment, hope tugged all of them forward. Then Vera's sensor board updated. She saw the pattern in raw data, not distance. A lattice of hostile signatures arranged in a precise net beyond that light. Heavy fighters hung in a disciplined grid, overlapping firing arcs, every solution already plotted on their emergence vector. "Jarek," she said quietly, "that's not an exit." "It's the only way out," he answered, "and they know it." He saw it on his own truncated display a heartbeat later. Enough to understand, no brake, no turn, no climb, just velocity and walls. "Then we change the way out," he said. He slipped free of his restraints. "Explain," Keln demanded. "We're not getting past that kill zone in a straight line," Jarek said, stepping back from the pilot's chair. "And if I keep trying to beat the canyon with speed, we burn up before we see daylight." He looked at Vera, eyes hard. "You said I was fighting the rock. Time to stop." "You want to crash?" she asked. "I want to use what we've already paid for," he said. He nodded toward the walls on the forward display. The canyon throat twisted like a corkscrew, its interior smoothed here and there by ancient water, leaving long curving planes of stone. "The walls are already giving us vector changes for free," he said. "I've been wrestling against them, now we ride them." Vera understood faster than she liked. "You're going to bounce us off the side," she said. "Glance," he corrected. "If I dump the main engine and feed everything into the manoeuvring thrusters at the exact moment, the wall becomes a pivot instead of a hammer. But I can't hold that line alone." He fixed his gaze on her. "I need you to bend us at the right instant, not to hit him." He jerked his chin toward the sensor icon that was Scythe Leader returning to his fighter, but to miss the canyon's edge by exactly enough. Her fear pressed in, not of death, but of failing when they all depended on her. Her flaw whispered that she could just reach deeper, let the Force catch whatever mistakes she made. No, she drew a breath that tasted of ozone and overheated metal. "Kill the main when I say," she said, "and you keep the thrust exactly where I push it. No heroics." "Thought that was the point," Kel muttered. "The point is we live long enough to regret this," she shot back. She moved forward, placing one hand flat on the bulkhead, feeling the vibration of the dying engine. With her other hand, she rested fingertips on Jarek's shoulder. "Fly with the canyon," she said, "not through it." He slid back into the pilot's seat, fingers finding the controls like old friends. Outside, Scythe Leader's TIE slid into position at the head of his remaining fighters, locking onto the courier's projected exit vector. "Crossfire set," came a crisp voice over his squad frequency. "Hold until they break into daylight," he answered calmly. His gloved hands rested light on his own yoke. "We want them thinking they made it." The canyon's throat became a blur. Jarek didn't look at the exit anymore. He watched the wall, the curve like a giant's palm on their port side, its angle shifting with every meter. "Ready," Vera said. Her voice was low, tight. She extended not outward in a blast, but along the ship's skin, feeling the air drag, the uneven micro-eddies where stone jutted imperceptibly. The dying main engine throbbed, threatening to seize. 3, 2... She felt the precise spot where the canyon wall's angle would translate their forward momentum into an upward and lateral kick. "Now!" "Cutting main," Jarek said. His hand slammed the control. The ship lurched as the main drive went dead, the shriek of its overtaxed core dropping into a suddenly hollow silence filled only by wind. For a heartbeat they were a dead stone flung forward in the gorge. "Dumping all power to manoeuvring," Vera snapped. The side thrusters roared to life in a hard, sustained burn. On sensors it looked absurd, a sideways blast that without guidance would have simply slammed them into rock. With guidance it became something else. Vera's focus narrowed to a knife point. She felt every micro-tilt of the hull, every centimetre of clearance. She nudged the thrust not in gross strokes, but in hair-fine corrections, turning the whole ship into a glancing blow waiting to happen. They hit the wall. Stone boomed along the port side, a grinding, shuddering impact that flattened everyone inside against their restraints. The hull sprayed dust and fragments, but instead of crumpling, the contact smeared their forward vector into a tight upward arc. They slingshotted. The courier flipped, nose rising, belly turning toward open sky as they burst from the canyon mouth not as a target, but as a tumbling, twisting projectile. Scythe Leader's calculations were perfect, until they weren't. His fire control predicted a ship continuing in a straight line. What he got was a freighter flipping end over end, inverted, crossing through the crossfire cone at an angle his computers hadn't been told to expect. "Adjust!" someone shouted over his comm, too late. The first volley from his heavy fighters lanced, through the space where the courier should have been, stitching empty air. Their second volley met their leader. As the courier rolled through the kill box, Scythe Leader yanked his tie hard to compensate. Instead of clearing his own formation, he cut into the paths of his wingmen. Green lances meant for the rebel ship slashed across his wings. One shot caught his port panel. The sudden loss of lift spun him sideways. He collided with the fighter beside him in a flash of ruptured fuel and shattered struts. The twin TIEs became a spray of fragments that shredded a third, sending a blooming fireball tumbling over the canyon mouth. Below them, the courier's battered antennae finally found a clean line through the interference. "Invert the array," Keln gasped. One hand on his bloody shoulder, the other slamming data transmission controls. "Line of sight, tight beam." The stolen packet, compressed schematics, ident codes, everything they'd come here for, lashed out in a narrow "pulse." aimed at a waiting receiver buried in some anonymous relay buoy beyond the horizon. "Signal away," he said, voice breaking. "Data's gone." "Then so are we," Jarek replied. The manoeuvring thrusters coughed. Their brief, furious burn had eaten the last power reserves. Systems across the ship flickered and died, leaving only emergency strips to paint the cockpit in sickly amber. Gravity reclaimed them. They hit the far side of the plateau in a grinding crash that went on forever. The courier ploughed through scrub and stone, belly plating tearing away in screaming sheets. An engine pod snapped free, cartwheeling off into the dust in a secondary explosion that rolled heat through the torn hull. Inside, bulkheads buckled. Crates burst loose, hurtling down corridors. Someone screamed. A raw sound cut off as a ceiling panel came down. Jarek's restraining straps bit meat as he slammed forward. The world spun, then stopped with a final massive jolt. Silence, except for the ticking of cooling metal and the distant thunder of falling rock back inside the canyon they'd just escaped. For a moment, no one moved. Then a hacking cough broke the stillness. Keln forced his straps free, half falling out of the turret cradle. His right arm hung useless. His shoulder was a mess of burned fabric and glossy blood. With his left hand, he dragged himself along a corridor now slanting at an angle. "Aft compartments?" he rasped. "Gone," Vera answered, staggering out of the system's alcove. Her face was smeared with soot. A gash along her jaw dripped red. Life support failed before impact. Those doors never reopened. Keln closed his eyes for half a second, then pushed off the wall. "Then we don't waste it," he said. They moved. Jarek kicked free of the mangled cockpit hatch, one leg nearly collapsing under him. He grabbed a fire suppressant canister, blasting foam into a flickering blaze licking along exposed wiring. "Forward cargo bay is breached," he said. "We're sitting in a nice, shiny crater." Vera limped past him toward the exterior hatch that still registered atmospheric pressure beyond. Each step sent a jolt up her spine. She kept going. She slapped the manual release. With a tortured squeal, the ramp dropped, settling into powdery dust. Smoke poured out ahead of them, curling into the open air. They had crashed on a shelf beyond the canyon's immediate sensor coverage, rock overhangs breaking direct lines from the sky. The Black Canyon's maw yawned behind them, a dark scar stretching back into the planet's bones. Jarek staggered down the ramp, lungs burning with every breath. "Comms?" he asked. "Short range only," Keln said, limping out behind him. Long range dish went with the engine pod. But before we hit, I saw something on the scope. Vera came down to join them, eyes on the horizon. "What?" Jarek asked. Keln nodded back toward the canyon mouth. "Big wedge on the fringe," he said. "Capital mass vectoring this way the second our beam went out. They know this route exists now. Next time, they won't send just an ace squadron and a boarding boat." Jarek swayed where he stood, then planted his feet. "Then there won't be a next time for us," he said. "We're leaving." "In what?" Keln snorted, gesturing weakly at the ruined freighter. Vera stepped past them both, boots sinking slightly into the dust. Her gaze stayed fixed on the distant canyon rim, where contrails already smeared the sky, thin white lines from incoming Imperial patrols sweeping to examine the chaos at the exit. "On our feet," she said. "Under rock, off open ground. They'll blanket the mouth first, then push recon farther out." As if to underscore it, the low, growing whine of engines drifted on the wind, distant but rising, echoing off the canyon walls they'd just defied. Keln slung his good arm under Jarek's to steady him. Jarek, in turn, took some of Keln's weight. Vera led the way toward a tangle of broken boulders and shallow cuts in the plateau, the wrecked courier belching smoke behind them. They limped forward as the sound of hunting engines swelled, the air trembling around them, and the dust at their feet dancing in time with the approaching roar.